Hey everybody, welcome back to the Convo Couch. I'm Fiorella Isabel. I wanted to talk about the Hunter Biden Burisma story that got censored right after it was leaked on Twitter and on Facebook. And the story came from the New York Post, but it was just an article because we have been talking about Burisma here for a very long time. We have covered it on the show from its inception and spoken about the regime change that had US-backed aid in helping Ukraine, who was dealing with neo-Nazis and working with neo-Nazis, carry out regime change. Now, the Democrats were the ones that were highly involved in that, and as were several politicians in general, but the story didn't get a lot of play. Every single time it was brought up in the media, it was completely ignored. And there was an intent to raise a probe on it, push a probe on it, and that's when all of this started. So on October 14th, there was a situation with Twitter where Twitter just stopped letting people share the link to the New York Post story. And here we have somebody named Sarah Ahmari said, "This is a big tech information coup. This is digital civil war. I, an editor at the New York Post, one of the nation's largest papers by circulation, can't post one of our own stories that details corruption by a major party presidential candidate, Biden." And as you can see on the picture, it says tweet not sent. Your tweet couldn't be sent because the link has been identified by Twitter or our partners as being potentially harmful. Visit our help center to learn more. So Twitter went and created a thread on Twitter safety, and they basically said, "We want to provide much needed clarity around the actions we've taken with respect to two New York Post articles that were first tweeted this morning. The images contained in the articles include personal and private information like email addresses and phone numbers, which violate our rules." And they cited the private information policy there. As noted this morning, we also currently view materials included in the articles as violations of our hacked materials policy. Commentary on or discussion about hacked materials, such as articles that cover them but do not include a link to the materials themselves, aren't a violation of this policy. Our policy only covers links to or images of hacked materials themselves. The policy established in 2008 prohibits the use of our service to distribute content obtained without authorization. We don't want to incentivize hacking by allowing Twitter to be used as a distribution for possibly illegally contained materials. And so they had an update to their election integrity work, which is really interesting because I didn't know that Twitter was a big election integrity advocate. I was completely unaware. I mean, as an election integrity activist and election integrity, advocate who does a lot of research on this topic, it took me by surprise. And so what do they mean by that? Well, they said, "We are committed to improving the health of the public conversation on Twitter and protecting the integrity of our elections." Is an essential part of that mission. Ahead of upcoming elections today, we are sharing updates across three critical areas of our election integrity efforts. 1, updates to the Twitter rules. 2, detection and enforcement. And 3, product improvement. So they completely molded the laws and changed it so they could push their narrative. Updates on to the Twitter rules. We have updated the Twitter rules to provide a clear guidance around several key issues. Fake accounts. And this one is what we're seeing now. A lot of leftist accounts completely wiped out and censored. As platform manipulation tactics continue to evolve, we are updating and expanding our rules to better reflect how we identify fake accounts and what types of inauthentic activity violate our guidelines. We now may remove fake accounts, engage in a variety of emergent malicious behaviors. Some of the factors that we will take into account when determining whether an account is fake include use of stock or stolen avatar photos, use of stolen or copied profile bios, use of intentionally misleading profile information, including profile location. So if you have been suspended and you create a new account and you're still you, they're going to be figuring that out as well. The distribution of hacked materials. Gee, this one looks like a real winner. Our rules prohibit the distribution of hacked materials that contain private information or trade secrets that or could people in harm's way, which is literally what the CIA says when it comes to information, protecting the truth, making sure it's the right information. It's the same talking points. We are also expanding the criteria for when we will take action on accounts which claim responsibility for a hack, which includes threats and public incentives to hack specific people and accounts. Commentary about a hack or hacked material, such as news articles discussing a hack, are generally not considered a violation of this policy. Generally, right? But again, a lot of people who talk about Julian Assange are shadow banned, censored. A lot of people who talk about Russiagate, we saw what was happening with Russiagate story also being removed in regard to the CrowdStrike with Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama's involvement in the declassification of these documents that led to really cementing the fact that Russiagate is a hoax and is a conspiracy theory. Detection and enforcement. We continue to enforce our rules against intentionally misleading election-related content. In August, we removed approximately 50 accounts misrepresenting themselves as members of various state Republican parties. We have also taken actions on tweets sharing media regarding elections and political issues with misleading and incorrect party affiliation information. We continue to partner closely with the RNC, DNC, and state election institutions to improve how we handle these issues. So they're telling you flat out they're partnering with the duopoly to make sure these narratives are fine. People think that by censoring Trump or censoring any dissent, they're helping to protect people from misinformation, but what they're actually doing is bringing on more censorship that eventually comes against the left, like the actual left, and against people who are actually trying to hold the state and these private entities and these mega corporations accountable. In August, we removed 770 accounts engaging in coordinated behavior, which appeared to originate in Iran. Oh God, here we go, Iran. Our investigations into this activity continues, and we will share further updates on our findings with law enforcement, our industry peers, and the public. So they're not only doing this investigation on the privately, they're working with law enforcement. They're working with, which is the police. They're also working with the security state, obviously, and they're working with industry peers, meaning big tech companies like that, people in charge of these institutions. They're not really working with the public unless the public is on their side. This is fascism. I mean, this is direct, bigoted, out there fascism, and it's coming from the Democratic Party. They're literally targeting people that are dissenting and that are pushing back against their narrative. The last thing they said is, we know we have more work to do to provide clarity in our product. When we enforce our rules in this manner, we should provide additional clarity and context when preventing the tweeting or DMing of URLs that violate our policies. So I just want to reiterate the fact that the Twitter is blatantly admitting to working with both the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, big tech, rich corporate oligarchs who own tech, and they are doing this to make sure that people don't promote any falseness on our elections, when the reality is our elections are completely corrupt, fraudulent, and completely controlled by the corrupt oligarchy, the corrupt state. And so it's a giant gaslight. Like, we are being gaslighted in an enormous way right now. They're literally using this information against us. So basically, they are painting themselves as the protectors and the gatekeepers of information, and that if anything that you post doesn't go into with accordance to what they're saying, then you are fake news, you are a conspiracy theorist, you are a danger, so you will be removed. That is as fascist as it gets, because it's not true. The vast majority of people who are being taken down are people who are telling the truth. This is why we're seeing the attack on the press in collusion with this. That is collusion. This is collusion, not Russia. Russia isn't censoring me right now. Twitter is. The Democratic Party is. And they're all doing it in an effort to paint that they're stopping this misinformation, when in fact they are abetting and aiding in this misinformation. And here is a tweet that I wanted to highlight by a constituent who said, Has everyone forgot that Twitter spokesperson is Nick Pacilio, a former Kamala Harris press secretary, right? And he was the communications at Twitter, and he says it right there. Former Kamala Harris press sec, proud UC Berkeley alum, shady son of a bitch, Gizmodo. Okay. So Sarcasm Stardust points out that Kamala Harris's former press secretary is communications manager at Twitter. Twitter's public policy director recently joined Biden's transition team. I'm just saying. And she is just saying. But what she's saying is entirely correct. This isn't like reaching in any way, shape, or form. You cannot tell me that you working for Twitter and being a former Kamala Harris pusher is not a conflict of interest. You could hire somebody didn't work for Kamala Harris. You could hire somebody that was more neutral, that wasn't really actually fully on working for the campaign, and then we turn around and we see like all this censorship supposedly going at the right, but really, like, when they take down the right, they also take down the actual left, because it's any sort of dissent. And this is why cheering for censorship is freaking bullshit, right? Because I haven't even gotten to the part of the fact that this is all for trying to coddle Joe Biden and to save his campaign. So Andy Stone, who is the spokesperson for Facebook, said, while I will intentionally not link to the New York Post, I want to be clear that this story is eligible to be fact-checked by Facebook's fact-checking partners. In the meantime, we are reducing its distribution on our platform. So they're totally pretending that this is entirely false, right? I mean, if you own a company, you're going to support somebody, right? You're going to have an opinion. Problem is, when you have so much power as a CEO of a big tech company, and a big platform that has so much influence, then it becomes an issue, because you are using that and colluding and co-working with institutions of power, of political power, to push a certain candidate and a certain narrative. And who gets to decide what is real and what isn't? It is certainly not big tech, and it's certainly not the state that is led by corrupt politicians who really just want to maintain the status quo. Every mainstream media outlet basically had this as false too. The Washington Post, a quick guide to Trump's false claims about Ukraine and the Bidens. The New York Times, allegation on Biden prompts pushback from social media companies. 3 weeks before Election Day, Trump allies go after Hunter and Joe Biden. So they're painting it as, oh, poor Hunter and poor Joe. MSNBC, why Trump's desperate Biden-gate Hail Marys keep backfiring. And their Fortune 500, Facebook partners with the Atlantic Council to fight election propaganda. It just seems relevant, right? That this is an issue, because the Atlantic Council is Facebook's third-party fact checker, and they're funded. They were funded by Burisma, which is that same company that Hunter Biden was on the board of. So the truth, in essence, is that Biden did provide U.S. assistance to the Ukraine to promote fracking and gas, and that he then got his son also on the board of this Ukrainian natural gas company. And Hunter Biden, of course, the emails show him referencing his law firm for, quote, discussions of state energy and national security council. He mentioned also the U.S. expertise in gas development. So this is when the Obama administration reportedly was offering fracking assistance to allies in the region. The New York Post also came up with an even more recent article that revealed how Hunter Biden tried to cash in big on behalf of his family with a Chinese firm. One email that was sent to Biden was with the subject line expectations, and included details of remuneration packages for 6 people involved in the business venture. Biden was identified as chair, vice chair, depending on the agreement with CEFC, which is a reference to the Shanghai-based conglomerate China Energy Company. The email outlined a provisional agreement under which 80% of the equity or shares in the new company would be split equally among 4 people. Those initials corresponded to the sender and 3 recipients, with H apparently referring to Biden. So you guys can see it right here. There it is, and it's highlighted right there. The quote big guy was not identified. The emails contained in a trove of data that the owner of a computer repair shop in Delaware said was recovered from a MacBook Pro laptop that was dropped off in April 2019 and never retrieved. The computer was seized by the FBI, and a copy of its contents made by the shop owner shared with the Post this week by former Mayor Rudy Giuliani. So this was another email sent by Biden on August 2nd of 2017. Involves a deal struck with the vanished chairman of CEFE, Yi Jianming, for half ownership of a holding company that was expected to provide Biden with more than $10 million in a year. Yi had ties to the Chinese military and intelligence service, but hasn't been seen since taken into custody by the Chinese authorities in early 2018. And CEFC went bankrupt earlier this year, according to reports. Biden wrote that Yi had sweetened the terms of the earlier 3-year consulting contract with the CEFC that was to pay him $10 million annually for introductions alone. The chairman changed the deal after we met in Miami to a much more lasting and lucrative arrangement to create a holding company, 50% owned by me and 50% owned by him. A company called Hudson West III opened a line of credit in September 2017. Credit cards issued against the account were used by Hunter, his uncle James Biden, and James's wife Sarah Biden to purchase more than $100,000 worth of extravagant items, including airline tickets and multiple items at Apple stores, pharmacies, hotels, and restaurants, the report said. The documents obtained by the Post also include attorney engagement letters executed in September 2017, which one of Yi's top lieutenants, former Hong Kong government official Chi Ping Patrick Ho, agreed to pay Biden $1 million retainer for counsel to matters related in the U.S. law, advice pertaining to the hiring and legal analysis of any U.S. law firm or lawyers. And you guys can see the attorney engagement letter, identification of parties. This agreement is being made between Robert Hunter Biden and Mr. Patrick Ho, the Deputy Chairman and Secretary General of China's Energy Fund Committee, who is the client. Compensation: neither Biden's lawyer, the Joe Biden campaign, Gillard, Dong, nor Ho's lawyer returned requests for comment. But Biden's lawyer has previously said there is no need to comment on any so-called information provided by Rudy Giuliani. He has been pushing widely discredited conspiracy theories about the Biden family, openly relying on actors tied to Russian intelligence. His record of dishonesty in these matters speaks for itself. Basically, the entire U.S. media is completely lying about this whole situation. And except maybe the New York Post and I guess the right, non-mainstream media, as much because they want to get Joe Biden on this because it's politically expedient for them. But at the same time, you can't discard that just because they are now hopping on the story and they want to use it against Biden doesn't mean that it's not true, because we've been covering the story since a year and a half ago. And it goes even further than that. Biden was one of several Democrats who provided U.S. aid and helped provide U.S. aid to arming neo-Nazis in the Ukraine. Where the story now, this with Hunter Biden is coming from. This is from over a year ago.
And the skinny is Joe Biden was Obama's front man in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And he abused his power to get the Ukrainian head prosecutor, fired so he could put in his own friendly prosecutor that would drop the probe of corruption against this natural gas company called Burisma. Now, remember that name. Because the only problem is that Joe Biden's son, Hunter, is on the board of Burisma. Okay? So once they were free of conviction and Joe Biden was on camera, he just recently bragged about it again. He threatened not to give Ukraine, remember the side he backed in their coup, He threatened to not give Ukraine the billions of dollars in aid if they didn't fire this prosecutor right there. And then he was fired 6 hours later, and they took the case, the probe, and they shipped it to another division. And then after that, the money came going. U.S. bank records show Hunter Biden's American-based firm, Rosemont Seneca Partners, LLC, received regular transfers into accounts, usually more than $166,000 a month from Burisma from the spring of 2014 to the fall of 2015, during the period when Vice President Joe Biden was the main official dealing with Ukraine in its tense relations with Russia. So here goes Joe Biden abusing his power. And he funneled, they give billions of dollars of Joe tax dollars money, your tax dollars, went to Ukraine, and then they used this money, a piece of this money, to funnel it through a company to give it to Hunter Biden.
Adam Schiff and several Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, John Kerry, her children and his children were also involved in having dinners and fancy meetings with Poroshenko in the Ukraine. So here's Adam Schiff's signature authorizing travel to the Ukraine. He was actually going to dinners and meetings regarding aiding the Ukrainian government with U.S. military support against Russia. Many meetings involved Igor Pasternak, the CEO of Worldwide Aeros Corp, a defense manufacturer. And as you can see from the picture, there is Adam Schiff, and he is saying that he is going as a professional staff with the House Intelligence Committee. He made a lot of money, actually, from going to these meetings with Igor Pasternak, because it was of course, the U.S. is always interested in making sure that the Russians do not in any way, shape, or form any strong alliances with anybody. The United States always wants to make sure that they have the upper hand when it comes to Russia. And so when there is Ukraine involved in the situation, they are going to try to push a friendly takeover in Ukraine rather than Russia have the upper hand, because we always want to make sure that Russia is controlled. We definitely want Russia to always be the enemy, and this was a part of a attempt to support Ukraine, even if it meant working with neo-Nazis. Now, Joe Biden, of course, was Obama's frontman during the Ukraine interactions, and Joe Biden used his influence to get the head prosecutor, who was actually doing a probe into the Burisma, into the Ukraine situation, fired. And Joe Biden bragged in video about how he was threatening to withhold billions of dollars in aid, and if they didn't get rid of this guy. And guess what? They did get rid of the prosecutor and put in a more friendly one.
And I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
So this was a long time coming, you guys. The U.S. and the Israel and Western governments knowingly abetted and aided in training and arming neo-Nazis in Ukraine. The Electronic Intifada had a really great article regarding Israel arming neo-Nazis in the Ukraine. During this time, also, the U.S., of course, would shortly be right there with them. And this was back in 2018. They reported that Israel arms were being sent to heavily armed neo-Nazi militia in Ukraine. The big story was that Israeli rifles ended up in the Ukraine supporting neo-Nazis, which of course is the irony of everything, right? The same weapons were used in this case were also being used against Palestinians in Gaza, specifically the Great March of Return protests in Gaza. Israel's military aid to Ukraine and its neo-Nazis emulates similar programs by the United States and other NATO countries, including the UK and Canada. So obsessed are they with defeating a perceived threat from Russia that they seem happy to aid even openly Nazi militias as long as they fight on their side. This is also a throwback to the early Cold War when the CIA supported fascists and Hitlerites to infiltrate from Austria into Hungary in 1956, where they began slaughtering Hungarian communist Jews and Hungarian Jews as communists. So history repeats itself, and that's where we're at right now. And it's really interesting to see the misinformation campaign in the United States, where people are still openly calling everybody Russia-gators and Russian assets, and you work for Putin and Trump, when Trump has been, as we have mentioned many times on the show, extremely hard on Russia, actually. And Putin actually trolled them by saying Biden would actually be closer in line to him than Donald Trump. And another thing I just want to point out is that these videos in this thread, of course, are over a year old. They're almost a year and a half old. Here we discuss how we thought that Biden's dealings in the Ukraine would affect the Biden campaign. This should be a story that would have disqualified him from the onset. I figured it wouldn't, because the vast majority of Americans don't understand foreign policy. They fall for the mainstream media narrative, and the Democrats and the propaganda machine all work in tandem to really just get rid of actual information or make it look like a conspiracy infected with a bunch of bullshit to throw it out, right? That's what QAnon is. That's what these sites like PragerU, all these like right-wing media that people want to censor, they have truths in their lies, right? And so they by going after them, you're basically making these issues completely unable to be part of a discussion. You're making them all conspiracy theory, when in fact not everything is conspiracy theory. It is purposely made that way so we dismiss it, so we don't talk about election integrity, so we don't talk about Julian Assange, so we don't talk about the actual issues with sex trafficking of children, etc.
They're going to reopen this case. They're going to start speaking to the Justice Department now. So this is something that could sack Joe Biden quickly and get him out of this race.
I don't think so, because nobody pays attention to foreign policy, and this is going to go over a lot of people's heads, and they're going to make sure of it. I don't think this is just going to take him out. I think this is horrible, and I think this is disgusting, and it just shows like how he can get away with it, because people are so ignorant about foreign policy, and they're so busy pushing the Russiagate narrative.
Yeah.
But when something like this comes out with numbers and data and facts and proof, they're like, oh no, well, yeah, like they pretend like, they don't know about it.
And they have hard numbers. Now we have to consider this, fam. Donald Trump is going to be seeking some retaliation for Paul Manafort. They went into these numbers over here in Ukraine. We're able to get all that information from Ukraine, use it against Manafort, and throw him in federal prison. Mm-hmm. So Donald Trump is going to be looking for something. Now the question is he going to wait and hopefully hope that Joe wins the primary so that when he's facing Joe, he can just release all this fucking information and put it all over there? Or are we going to get this out now early and keep talking about this to try and disqualify Joe Biden as much as possible? This is corruption, and we got him right here. They talked about this several years ago. The mainstream media brushed it off because they shipped this probe off to another department and just buried it. Remember, Joe Biden, too, is a Zionist, self-proclaimed.
If I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
Unfortunately, I don't think the majority of America is intelligent enough to realize just how bad the situation in Ukraine is. But it's up to us and other people to talk about it and make it like a mainstream thing.
I mean, Joe Biden and Barack Obama pretty much supported a side that was just anti-Russia, that eventually money that we were using to fund them and help them out went to neo-Nazis. And it just tore the country apart. And we did that, why? Because it was Ukraine neighboring Russia, and we wanted to create more tensions with Russia. Not to mention that Joe Biden was always a NATO pusher. He's got a war hawk fucking mentality. The laundry list is like 13 deep with Joe Biden right now. Like I said, I'm pressed to challenge him of who has more shit on them, Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden.
Exactly. And Joe Biden is definitely a very pro-war Democrat, or Republican, I would say. He's definitely wants to send more ships to the South China Sea. He definitely wants to go into Venezuela and support the undemocratic failed coup of Juan Guaido instead of supporting the democratically elected leader of Maduro. He also wants to go and continue sanctioning Iran, sanctioning the Middle East, sanctioning Syria, continue pushes there, continue supplying Saudi Arabia. And as you guys saw, he calls himself a Zionist. He is very pro-Israel, so there's no stopping what's going on in the Palestinian, I would say, genocide at this point, the humanitarian crisis that it's been ongoing forever. So this isn't anything new, and this is what the Democratic Party is trying to do by covering it up. They're trying to continue to dispel any notion that Joe Biden is an extremely flawed candidate, if not far worse than Hillary Clinton ever was, and that his flaws and the hypocrisy and the censorship, as hard as they attempt to really protect and coddle Joe Biden from that, all it does is backfire, because it just makes Donald Trump's base and other people who don't even like Trump, like people trying to tell the truth about the actual situation, like the media propaganda machine has failed to do, because they're propaganda, not journalists, is really doing them a disservice. I mean, this is just going to help Trump, because all it does is make him a martyr. All it does is you're playing to Trump's base. And all it does is just make it better for him. It just makes him look like he's in the right. And now we have Trump punching from the left, talking about, Biden's situation in the Ukraine, talking about Biden's crime bill. And there's no defense to that, because Joe Biden doesn't talk about policy. And if he does mention something, he obfuscates and he completely ignores any sort of accountability that he should take, and he won't actually systemically change anything or push for actual changes in anything. So at the end of the day, what we have are two fascist presidents. One of them is operating with coordination from the fascist Democratic Party, which is trying to censor and silence free speech through the social media platforms, through more censorship, through controlling the internet, through controlling the mass media propaganda machine. The other is supporting fascism through the security state too, the police state, on people on the ground, but also through going after journalists in general, journalists, protesters, and people who are speaking truth, like Julian Assange, still pushing for that indictment, for that extradition. And it's absolutely disgusting, because one is more flat out fascist, but the other one is a crypto fascist. And so it's really, this is why it doesn't matter, right? Because Joe Biden even told people during a town hall that if you don't like me, vote for Trump. He even said it, but he didn't say, if you don't like me, vote third party. Why? Or vote your conscience. Why? Because they don't want you to do that. That's exactly what they don't want you to do. They don't really care if you vote for Trump or Biden. What they don't want you to do is to vote your conscience. They don't want you to stop playing into their game, because the moment you stop playing into their game, the moment their power is gone. And so this whole Russiagate cover up, and this whole CrowdStrike cover up, and then this whole Ukrainian cover up, where they're trying to protect Hunter Biden, the Bidens, from any sort of accountability, it just goes to show you how far the Democratic Party will go, and how corrupt they will get, and how dirty they will fight to make this happen, to make it look like they are the party that's with you, that's on you, that's better, when they are working in tandem with the intelligence agencies, with the big tech corps, and they don't really care about your free speech or your rights either. So the choices are very simple. Do not participate in voting for either of these candidates, and further, continue speaking truth and spreading truth when it comes to regard of these situations like Burisma. Don't look at things as partisan. You have to look at things as what they are. And while this is being played into partisan politics of Democrat versus Republican, the truth is the truth, no matter where it comes from. The truth has been for a long time that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden made money off of supporting and aiding neo-Nazis in the Ukraine, and the definitely conflicts of interest there. And that is corruption in itself. That is essential corruption. And that's something that should be, that these people should be held accountable to, whether they're running for president or not. We're not here to protect them from that. And the fact that the system goes after people for things like drugs or making, you know, a mistake if they were young and they stole one time, and it puts the heavy hand of the law in there, and they can't get out. They're ruined. They're felons. They can't vote in most states. They can't get a normal job because of their record. The system is so hard on these people. But when it comes to politicians, when it comes to Wall Street, when it comes to bankers, when it comes to war criminals like Joe Biden, when it comes to those people, the system gives them a slap on the wrist, if that, or praises them, and they end up winning Nobel Peace Prizes. Hello, Obama. And the fact of the matter is that has to change. And the only way for that to change is for us to pay attention to our press freedoms, and for us to continue supporting real journalism, not propaganda journalism. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please check out our Rokfin, Rokfin. It's free to sign up. Just sign up. You can get access to everybody. You can also endorse us for $9.99. We also have a Patreon where anything helps, any amount of money that you can give. We really need your help to continue doing this, especially in times like this where we are completely dependent on the people, because we don't want to be funded by any oligarchs or any big wigs who are trying to control the truth and trying to control us from telling the truth.